maybe this is a good time to begin. Bongani, thank you so much.
Colleagues, I'm sharing a space with Angela and colleagues here, and then she's also trying to get us organized, social distance, sanitizers, mask off. So it's a new reality, and it's also our new world. So with those few words as an icebreaker, allow me, colleagues, to extend our warm welcome to all of you. And thank you very much for joining us today for the launch of the two new books, The Butcher Boys and Iconic Sculpture and its Conversation, and also New Insights, Technical Imagining of Paintings in Iziko, South African National Gallery. Also allow me to extend our warm greetings to colleagues who are joining us from the US and then also from Finland and Canada. Perhaps that's the beauty of experiencing COVID-19, a silver lining, because now we are launching this book virtually, but then we have the privilege of interacting with colleagues in far away corners. And then some of the colleagues also here in South Africa are also in different spaces and different areas. And this also enables us to engage visually. I will not be doing my work if I'm not able to welcome Alison, Mustafa, Patricia, and Richard. A special welcome to all of them. They will also be contributing today, but also for dedicating their time, their energy to enlighten our conversation and also our engagement with objects, and also our project as we try to make sense of that which we inherited. These two books, I think you are going to agree with me, they reflect the intentional work behind conservation work, particularly at Iziko, South African National Gallery. As I've indicated earlier, Mustafa, Patricia, Alison, and Richard will elaborate more on that. My responsibility today also is, in a way, for welcoming also and thanking and thanks is to also to thank the Mellon Debut Foundation for funding the conservation project at Iziko, the Andrew Mellon Foundation for funding this particular project. We are also thankful to Patricia, the chairperson of the project at Iziko. Patricia has been guiding this project as the chairperson of the Conservation Steering Committee within Iziko. She's done that exceptionally well. And I'm sure you'll agree with me that the project benefited a lot from her expertise and from her passion. But then the brain behind this, the engine behind this particular project is Angela, who saw to it that we deliver, that we also keep to our timeframes. Her work ethic is exceptional. I'm not supposed to welcome her today, but I would also like to recognize the work that she's done and seeing to it that we deliver a work of exceptionally good quality and exceptionally high standard. With those few words, colleagues, I welcome you, and I also extend my thank yous to all the contributors to these two projects. We encourage all of you and also your friends to get a copy. I'm optimistic and very sure that you are going to enjoy the reading. Once again, thank you to this virtual launch of the two books. We hope you are going to enjoy the engagements that Angela is now going to open up. Thank you. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you very much, Bongani. Thank you very much. Such an exciting day today. And Alison, thank you so much for joining us. So it's 6 o'clock for Alison, which is very special. She's Director of Applied Research and Outreach at the Institute of Preservation of Cultural Heritage at the Yale. And she's joining us from the States. She's also on board VOCA, Voices of Contemporary Art, which is an organization dedicated to the role of artists in the stewardship of contemporary art. Prior to Yale, Alison was a program officer for Arts and Heritage at the Andrew Mellon Foundation. And in the last 7 years, she has kindly provided us with guidance and facilitated so much at the National Gallery and Conservation. Alison, thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Angela. It's very exciting to be here, and I already had 1 cup of coffee, so I'm ready to start my day. As Angela said, I'm speaking to you from my home near the campus of Yale University in the state of Connecticut, which sits on land and waterways that Algonquin-speaking Indigenous peoples and nations have stewarded through generations. We honor and respect the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples, their nations, and this land. Let me first congratulate and thank everyone at ISANG, and starting with Angela, for the generous invitation to join you today from halfway across the world. And thanks also to Ruxana Bongani, Patricia Davidson, as Bongani mentioned, she really is a key player here, and all the other tirelessly working staff who saw this projects through to fruition. Michael Hall, Bronwyn Leone, Dr. Brendan Cole, we thank you all for all the work that went into bringing us to today. It's an honor for me to launch us today and to celebrate these exceptional publications. This week has been a lifetime for those of us here in the United States, so please be gentle in any assessments you have of how I come across to you. And I also beg forgiveness that I have no slides. I have nothing beautiful for you to look at. So just keep looking at these beautiful books and hang in, because the other speakers will also have some beautiful visuals after you're done looking at my face talking to you for a few minutes. My time today is going to be spent commenting on the nature of these achievements, and I want to place them in a global context, one of transformative museum practice at the highest level and practical ethical stewardship at its most basic response to the mission of museums in the public trust. So a little bit of why I'm here today. As Angela mentioned, I was at the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. This is an organization that is the largest private supporter of the arts and humanities in the United States. It also has a global reach. And it was in this capacity that I worked with Iziko colleagues on the grants that supported the work that we're celebrating today. I cherish my visits to ISANG, and I hope to return as soon as we're able to travel again. And long before Mellon, I worked in conservation at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I did some of the same kinds of work that Angela has done in her publications. So I come to this with honorably. And I've spent years studying the culture and practices surrounding conservation documentation, both academically and in my practical work life. So these remarkable publications and the deeper, more extensive systematic work they represent underneath, the things that didn't even make it into the book. These are notable contributions, and importantly, distinctly African contributions to a growing body of global interdisciplinary scholarship that embraces the best of what science and art can achieve at the intersection of curiosity and technology. We celebrate today these 2 new guidebooks that help us explore the physical manifestations of how and why humans create and how and why humans preserve. They place these fundamental activities in an evolving and refreshed tradition of how we as a civilization care for, document, memorialize, and pass on our cultural inheritances to successive generations. So I have 3 lenses that I thought would help focus these publications in a global context. The first is research and scholarship, then museum knowledge practice, and finally the public trust. So starting with research and scholarship. Museums as public knowledge and memory institutions have a singular obligation to understand, document, and attend to the physicality of the works in their care. In an ideal world, these obligations should exist in equal measure to how these works are interpreted for their aesthetic content or symbolic and historic meaning. Yet it is rarely the case in practice. It is rare among museums on the African continent to employ practicing conservation specialists on staff, let alone those who enjoy a status to research and educate comparable to that of curators. Yet the research capabilities, the discovery, the narrative, and the educational potentials are no less compelling to audiences and central to decision-making for treatment and long-term preservation. The practice of conservation and its documentation protocols help us all to learn how artists conceive and execute compositions, surfaces, colors, armatures, and ultimately how an experience of a piece is manifest. Materials make meaning. The conservator is equipped to help us decode and illuminate how the artist's choices of materials, to anticipate how they may change over time, and ultimately to assess if material changes endanger intended meaning. That fundamental scholarship is at the heart of the conservation endeavor and is at the heart of what brings us together today. The second lens is museum knowledge practices. Between 2006 and 2007, the Mellon Foundation organized 2 international meetings to discuss the challenges and opportunities in conservation documentation engendered by the rapid growth of digitization. With more than 35 museum directors and heads of conservation across the US, the UK, and the European Union, these leaders reckoned with, excuse me, the historic divergence of privilege and resource allocation that has driven a deep wedge between curatorial and conservation record keeping, thus segregating and isolating knowledge about collections within the same institution. Among the major art museums assembled, it was observed that curatorial records were universally housed separately from those in conservation. Most had staff and funding for digitizing curatorial records into dedicated databases and servers, while very few gave resources to conservation records. Access policies to these materials were uneven or non-existent. What knowledge then is lost in this institutional concept? It was argued back then, and it stands today, that we cannot divorce a museum's data from its mission. It didn't have to be this way. Knowledge systems, after all, are human constructs, as are our budgets and our institutions. A reminder that we all continue to be implicated in the conversation of who and what is valued and why. As we continue to work to break down the information cul-de-sacs and hierarchies, we celebrate today that Iziko adds new insights and the Butcher Boys to a succession of demonstration projects and process improvements that sprung forward from those 2006 and 2007 Mellon meetings. A few exemplars include the Rembrandt Database at the RKD in The Hague, the Chronic Digital Archive at the Museum Kunstpalast in Dusseldorf, the website smarthistory.org, and the Art Information Commons at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And I've just, as I list these things, I'm going to put links to them in the chat box in case anybody wants to see what these things are that I've just mentioned. Through Isang's books, we hear the voices of Jane Alexander and Richard Mudariki directly. We see the technical evidence in print, fully accessible to any reader, unrestricted from passwords and private databases. We experience these works through a new language of conservation expertise, a discipline that is not yet widely known or understood in the world, let alone in the South African context, yet one that has so much to offer. My third and final lens is the public trust. New Insights and the Butcher Boys not only invite the reader to share in discoveries, they also invite the reader into some of the most intimate conversations and encounters that can happen in a museum space. Anyone gets to peer beneath these painted surfaces, beyond what the unaided eye can see. Anyone can start to consider how artists make mistakes, have changes of heart, use grids, tracing, or mechanical devices in their processes. We go beyond the gallery veneer of perfection to consider damages, previous intervention attempts, natural aging. We start to understand the negotiation that goes on between the infinite endurance we aspire to and an entropy that none of us can escape. We as the public are given direct, unmediated access to Angela's thoughts, together with Jane Alexander's narratives, reflections, wishes, and thus we become part of their conversation. As notions of museum-authored truths and long-held dominant narratives continue to be challenged, and as Indigenous knowledge fights for legibility against entrenched colonial paradigms, ISANG finds itself with powerful new trust-building tools of literal and figurative transparency. Current best practices in conservation documentation have evolved to rely on engaging artists, living artists in dialogue, and in some cases over long durations, building trusted relationships. Documentation of contemporary artists' voice is paramount in developing preservation strategies, and their participation is essential for future conservation and presentation of their work. By working in collaboration, institutions demonstrate trust with their artists as well as with general audiences, altering familiar power dynamics. In conclusion, thank you for allowing This American to reflect on why these publications are so timely and impactful, and why they will have far-reaching resonance well beyond Cape Town. Let me once again congratulate Angela and the staff and leadership of ISANG on the launch of these inspiring new publications, and let me wish you much success for what's to come. Thank you.
So Alison, thank you so much. So Mustafa Mururiki, who is the cover artist of New Insights, with his painting, Don't Stand Me Down, and his technical examination exposed new information in both UV and infrared. He's known for his large-scale portraits. You can see the painting behind me. He's exhibited in several international exhibitions. His work is in a wide range of collections. The gallery is very proud that this is part of the collection. He's originally from Cape Town. He did his postgraduate in the Netherlands, and he's joining us from Finland. Thank you.
You know, it's kind of strange speaking about the technical aspects of the work without first speaking about you know, what my work is actually about, you know, and especially how my work relates to the South African context, because as you know, I never went to museums as a kid. You know, I didn't grow up knowing art. I grew up like my first exposure to art was through graffiti and just design, and you know, and I think that's something that you can kind of see coming through in the work. But just to give a kind of context about who I am, you know, I come from Bishop Lavis, which is on the Cape Flats. I have prepared a PowerPoint, but I'm unable to share my screen at the moment. But once you see what this kind of community looks like, you know, and the textures and colors you find there, it gives you a new kind of way of looking at the work that I do, because the community that I come from, through the processes of colonialism and apartheid, were stripped of, you know, our language, our culture, and our history, you know, and it's something that I always need to explain to people when I travel internationally. You know, people ask like, oh, what tribe are you from? You know, like, what kind of African are you, you know? And the visual culture that I grew up with was very similar to what everyone else that I encounter in Europe grew up with, you know. We for instance had programs like Heidi, which is you know, is supposed to represent Swiss, you know, lifestyle of someone in the Swiss Alps, or Niels Holgersson, you know, which is the story of a Swedish boy, you know, and funnily enough, all these cartoons that I grew up watching as a kid were were produced in Japan, you know, and all these images and that I was raised with came from a very Eurocentric angle, you know. So for me, part of my process of discovering myself was learning what, you know, how I connect with Africa, you know, and so at a certain point I went off to study graphic design after high school, and that was the first time I was exposed to Indebele painting, you know, the amazing graphical lines that the Ndebele used to you know, decorate their houses and living spaces, you know. But also, you know, it was the first time that I was actually exposed to art and learning about what about the processes and the materials that artists use to tell their stories, you know. So so for me, so in the painting that you have on the cover, the Don't Stand Me Down, for instance, if you look at the background pattern, it's kind of a combination of you know, two parts of my kind of cultural heritage that I try to combine, because also only in later life did I discover that my mother's father was Maori from New Zealand, you know, and so that also sent me into a whole other kind of visual culture, you know, to explore and play with, you know. So but these elements aren't just unique to Africa or to Polynesian culture, you know. Like if you look at Japanese, or you look at a lot of European design, these elements are quite universal, you know. And it's just you know, like when I'm confronted with these questions, or when someone, you know, comes and says a certain thing about, as you know, elements of the work that I do, you know, I think it's important to kind of explain why they are the way they are, and what kind of influence it. And also since the first paintings that I did, I have used layers to kind of build up the surfaces of my paintings. And you know, in fact, the first painting, my first painting that I consider like a completed painting, was painted over an art print, you know, and you know, my process also involves working on multiple works at the same time. So, you know, I'm not the kind of artist who just sits down and works on one piece at the same time. Like they all kind of develop over a long period of time, and also very slowly over time, you know. And yeah, you know, I wasn't sure what I should say, you know, about the process, you know, because it is a book about processes, and not so much about you know, my intentions and stuff. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you so very much. I'm guessing again that people might have questions near the end. I think this is definitely the pro of COVID, that we can, sorry to say, that we can travel around the world in an hour, and,
Yeah.
and that you were available. It was so meaningful that you were able to join us. So thank you very much. Thank you. To introduce you, Trish Smithen is the assistant professor and painting conservation and director art conservation program at Queen's University, and she's joining us from Canada. It was wonderful that Patricia could join us for the specialist workshop on modern and contemporary painting here last year in Cape Town at the National Gallery, and many will remember that Trish was head of the Tate, and about 50 conservators were with her. And she has a passion for acrylic paint, technical examination, as well as artist interviews. Trish, thank you so much for joining, and so early in the morning.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Angela. As Angela says, I'm speaking to you from Kingston, Ontario, Canada, which is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe. And I am so grateful to be speaking to you from this wonderful land, of which we are all responsible for taking care of. I am particularly honored to be here because it was wonderful to visit Cape Town for the first time last year to deliver this workshop. And I was able to see some of these artworks, and I'm just so delighted to be able to help you celebrate these publications. They are exceptional because they are truly centering the object as their focus, but not just from one perspective. They're really looking at multiple perspectives. We get the context of the paintings. We get information about their material structure and the voice of the maker. And this is what I'm here to comment on today. Is as we've just heard from Mustafa, thank you so much for your comments. I understand the confusion on the part of the artist about what exactly it is that conservators are asking about, and because we often seem to gloss over the meaning in our efforts to understand what kind of paint you used, or what sort of brush you used, or the layer structure of your objects. But the reason we do this is to help amplify and explain the meaning in the long run, and sort of helping make sense of the process of the object. Not only can give us some sense of the creative process, but it also helps us to preserve these objects in the long term. So it's incredibly valuable information for us, and it's a real privilege to be able to speak to the artist and really delve into some of those details that nobody else but a conservator would ask. The way I thought I would approach my little contribution today is to share with you three examples of artist interviews that I have done where there was just a little tidbit of information, a small amount of information, which made a really big impact on my ability to either understand or care for the objects. So I hope you'll bear with me as I share my screen, and hopefully this will work. Let's go with here. Okay, so my three examples are, the first one is a work by Paul Huxley, who's a British artist. And this work came into the collection at Tate not so long ago, maybe about 10 years ago. And when I first examined it for my PhD studies, it's in beautiful condition, but it had some very odd stains and deposits on the surface. And I was wondering a little bit about the history of this painting. And when I was able to talk to the artist, not only was he able to give me insight about sort of the meaning and structure from his perspective, but also about the history of the painting. And it was purchased by the Peter Stuyvesant Foundation, and they owned a cigarette factory. And in fact, their collection of modern art was displayed in the cigarette factory for the benefit of the workers. And you can see it in the photo on the right where it's hung up in the middle of the factory. And all of a sudden, this idea that there were these stains and deposits and odd materials that were sitting on the surface of the painting really came into focus. It's like, okay, it was not a museum object, or it wasn't in a private home, and these aren't sort of kitchen deposits from toast flying across the room. It was from a factory, and all of a sudden it really makes sense of what's happened to this history in terms of its materiality and how it's been preserved. So it was really a lovely little detail, and the fact that there was also this amazing photograph, because I could never have pictured the factory with the how were the works hung, and the fact that they were suspended from the ceiling in this way. It's very unusual. So it's a lovely little detail that I think really helps me to understand and helps me to preserve that object. Okay, so my second example is one of my favorite artists is Anselm Kiefer, and they have a number of his works at Tate, and there was this massive installation of Palm Sunday. And at the first installation at Tate Modern, the artist was there to speak to the curators, and I was told I could have 5 minutes with him. And 5 minutes was a lot. I went in there very serious with my list of questions, and the artist had just had a rather jolly lunch with the curators. So he was having, he was in a very good sort of playful mood. I was not, I was dead serious. And I think I slightly frightened him with the intensity of my questioning. But one of the key questions that I had for him was these incredible panels that you see on the wall are really detailed constructions with multiple materials. And in fact, the materials that are listed as part of the normal materials that you see that are listed even on the Tate website, it's not complete because there's so much more than you can list. So for example, that beautiful palm leaf is actually a real palm leaf that's covered in a mixture of plaster with PVA glue. And that's a little detail that he revealed. I would never have thought there was PVA glue in the middle of this. But you can see how fragile those structures are, and every time they move, little bits fall off. So my question was that intentional? Are they meant to decay and age? Or is this something we should be preserving? So every single time something falls off, should we be opening up the vitrine and trying to stabilize and preserve and restore these, these marvelous, wonderful constructions? And he gave a really beautiful answer, which was, if it's a really small loss, don't worry about it. If it's a really big loss, fix it. Inevitably, I followed up with a question, well, what's the difference between small and big? Are we talking a baseball? Are we talking, a hand? How big is big? And he was like, that's your problem, effectively. And it was really beautiful because even though it seems like a very mysterious answer, it was very much giving us permission to use our judgment in how to best care for these objects. And I think he understood that we're always balancing that the risk and the preservation in our ability to care for these things and move them forward in a really sort of ethical way that supports the meaning of the artwork going forward. And he basically gave us permission to use our judgment, which was delightful. And then my final example is this gorgeous painting by Lubaina Hamid. I was very privileged to speak to her just in the year before she won the Turner Prize in Britain, which is a really big deal there. And she spoke to me. I'm doing studies into acrylic painting, and so she was talking to me about her use of paint. And there were two little details about this that, well, actually lots of little details that I found informative. But one thing was I saw underdrawing, which I thought was charcoal. You know, it's a very particulate material, and that would make a difference on how we care for it and how we clean the object. And in a conversation with her, she confirmed that she wouldn't have used charcoal. She would be very afraid that those particulates would be caught up in the paint and be distributed and sort of add sort of smudging throughout the structure. She said that it was much more likely to have been a fat graphite pencil. And just a little detail like that, we really wouldn't be able to determine in any way other than speaking to the artist. And even all of our analytical capabilities make it very difficult to tell the difference between a bit of charcoal and a bit of graphite when it's buried within a paint structure. So that bit of information is just incredibly helpful. And then the other bit of information that I loved about this was that gorgeous dress with all the checkered pattern. She said she painted this whole painting very, very quickly, and there was no error, there was no room for error. So that was all done in one shot, and she was absolutely delightful to speak with. And she said that she looks at that dress now, which is one of her favorite parts of the painting, and says she doesn't understand how she managed to do it so well, which is really great, because I feel like I was then seeing what she was seeing as well. So I hope that little quick insight into like a few little details gives you a sense of what it means to us when the artists will speak to us and they tell us things and they share their stories, and it just brings the pictures to life for us, and then it helps us bring the pictures to life for others as well. So I would just like to thank all of the artists out there who do speak to us and give us information. And I would like to thank Angela for inviting me to be here today. And once again, just congratulate you on such wonderful publications. And I hope to see many more from you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Trish, that's just, yeah. It's wonderful. Yeah, just wonderful. It brings back all happy memories from last year and more to come. It's just really, really lovely. And it's lovely that I should have shared this earlier because I'm in room 7, so we could also share the Butcher Boy sculptures with all the other artworks today as well. And our next speaker is Richard Mudariki, who's a highlighted artist within our publication. So he's here. We discovered an exciting bull, which was revealed in infrared. And he's known for his original contemporary paintings that are full of social commentary on various African issues. He's participated in major exhibitions, both nationally and internationally. His painting was acquired fairly recently at the National Gallery. He's spoken to us in 2018 for the UCT-CCA workshop on artist materials and techniques, originally from Zimbabwe, and he's joining us here today. Thank you very much, Richard.
Hello, thank you, Angela. I'm using Bongani's account. So thank you, Bongani, for letting me using your computer. I feel very privileged to be here. And I think since the first time I'm actually being in an art gallery and actually finally also being in the presence of my painting, I think I'm quite excited. I'd like to thank Angela and the team for the publication. I feel very privileged to be part of this first publication and sort of the project also that marries creativity and creative arts and science. And I'm very, very privileged to be part of that. So basically, if I can talk about myself and my practice, my name is Richard Mudariki. As Angela said, I'm a visual artist, focusing only on painting. My work is very, I'll call it narrative. I try to visually represent my ideas through my paintings, whether political, social issues that I comment in my work. So the painting that we have behind me was kind of an interpretation of the sort of economical situation we had in my country back home in Zimbabwe, and the realization that it wasn't unique to Zimbabwe alone. It took place in various other countries in history. So the work kind of depicts and interprets that that sort of economic history and how currencies have been created and hyperinflation has affected not only countries, but also societies and individual lives. So in this work, I'd use acrylic paint, which I used to, in most of my early paintings, I've now started working on acrylic as well. In oil painting as well, which is a whole different medium. But I think also in link with this project is the realization of the importance of using quality materials in my work as well. So now I try to also understand sort of the chemical and the sort of ways that the paintings will in future be preserved, and try to use the best quality materials as I can in my work, because there's that realization that these artworks will obviously outlive the artist, and if they are produced first correctly and with the right materials, they will outlive for many, many, many years to come. So that is the first realization, to say I respect myself and respect the materials that I use in my work, and try to work with materials that are of quality. So in most of my other work, I'm actually going to share a screen. Okay. Sorry about that technical sort of setback. But these are some of my work that also been worked. I've worked, as I said, in between acrylic paint and oil paint as well. So it's an early work in 2011 titled The Passover. This is also another work created quite recently last year, also in oil and canvas. I actually enjoyed creating this work because it was, I was actually overseas in Paris, and it was sort of an interpretation of that. And with Paris having different weather also, the sort of like the chemical, how the work also materialized, as well as how the materials are quite different with different weather conditions. This is also another work, quite recent this year, titled African Love. This is a work on oil and canvas. And finally, also a work maybe quite related to what we're talking about today. It's titled Restoration. It's one of my early work that I did in 2005, that I did a reinterpretation of it being cleaned, sort of restored as well. I'm sure that's what the team here at Iziko do, most of restoring old work, and I try to restore that, but in a painting as well. So these are the works that I have to share, and yeah, and over to you, Angela.
Okay, great. So I just want to say a huge thanks to everybody for making this possible. These two wonderful 1.8 kgs and the smaller fabulous publication. So just a huge thank you to the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, for everybody who spoke today, for Dr. Patricia Davison, who's mentored the project all the way through, and for the great team that made these two projects of pride possible. And then finally to say, if you would like to share the word, or you'd like to purchase one of these publications, to say that they're non-profit, They go towards conservation education. They're available from the front desk of the National Gallery and from select bookstores. And yeah, hope you enjoy reading them and for joining us today. I'm indebted to everybody who spoke today. And yeah, thank you very much.